Hey Lizzonators, what is up? Welcome back to another video. Hey, I am Liz. If you guys are new, welcome to my channel. I am happy to have you. I created this series on my YouTube channel where I post nothing but fall, spooky, and Halloween related content for the months of September and October, and we called it Lizzoween. And this is episode 8 of Lizzoween, which makes it the second last episode of Lizzoween. It's so sad. So for the second last episode, we are going to do our annual all the time second last episode, which is reading ghost stories. I have this book. It's Haunted Canada 3, More True Ghost Stories. I got it off my same friend that I got them off last year. I have my Pepsi in our spooky little cup. We are dressed like a witch, and we are joined, this Chandler, you guys know him. He's going to be reading our ghost stories. We are both dressed as little witches. He's going to be here with me for our ghost stories. Usually it is my dog Moo, but this year it is my bunny Chandler. Get your popcorn, get your snacks, whatever, get a drink, and get cozy, and let's get some spook on. Oh. All right. Story number 2 is Halloween horror. St. John, New Brunswick. There are those who believe that an unsettling air remains at the scene of a particularly vicious crime long after it is committed. That may explain why, for years after the murder of Maggie Vale and her baby girl Ella May Horse, horses would balk as they approached a certain spot on Black River Road in St. John, New Brunswick. In September of 1869, children out berry picking discovered the skeletal remains of mother and child in a wooded area near the road. They couldn't be identified right away, but as the news of the horrifying discovery spread, people came forward with clues that led authorities to identify the victims, and after 2 weeks to charge a man named John A. Monroe with their murderers. The people of St. John were shocked. John Monroe was a pillar of the community. He was a well-known architect who had designed several buildings in the town. Though he had a wife and 2 young children, he had taken up with Maggie Vale, and little Ella was his daughter. Monroe claimed he was innocent of the murderers, but he was tired, found guilty, and sentenced to death. The week before he was hanged in February of 1870, he finally confessed that he had killed Maggie and Ella. On October 31st, All Hallows Eve, in 1868, John A. Monroe is buried in Fernhill Cemetery. In St. John, over the years, a story has preserved that on Halloween night, an eerie green glow emanates from beneath his tombstone. It's said that teenagers dare one another to steal onto the property and check it out, but to one has spoken publicly about doing so. Were they too afraid to go, or too afraid of what they saw? Whatever the reasons, they remain as silent as the grave. And there is the gravestone picture right there. And we're going to read The Voice of Evil. And this is Clarendon, Quebec. Susan Dagg liked her new log house. It was small, just 1 story with an attic, but she, her husband George, and their 2 young children, Susan and Johnny, were settling in nicely. They had built the home in 1889 on a farm at Clarendon, Quebec, a community on the Ottawa River, about 10 kilometers south of Charleville. Imagine her disgust then when she returned from the cow barn after the morning milking to find her kitchen reeking of human feces. The filthy waste, most likely from the outer house, had been smeared on the floor from one end of the house to the other. September 15th, 1889, was turning out to be a very unpleasant day. 2 other children were living in the Dagg household at the time. One was Diana Burden McLean, a poor 11-year-old girl who had been sent from Scotland to an orphanage in Belleville until a Canadian family came forward to give her a good home. Then the Daggs had adopted her with that in mind, and also in the hope that Diana would help Miss Dagg care for the 2 younger children. The other was a second orphan, a boy named Dean, who worked for various farmers in the area, and when they needed extra help, early on the morning of the 15th, Dean had found a $5 bill on the kitchen floor. When he climbed down the ladder from his sleeping corner in the attic in 1889, $5 was a lot of money. And he had given the bill to Mr. Dagg, telling him where he had found it, but George was suspicious. The night before, his wife had tucked that bill safely away in her dresser, along with the $2 bill. After Dean headed outside to do some chores, George asked Susan to check the dresser to see if the $2 bill was there. It wasn't. So George climbed up the attic to look for it and found it in Dean's bed. Assuming that Dean was a thief and that he had made the mess in the kitchen to distract them from the theft, the Daggs ordered him to leave and reported him to the local authorities. The next day, though, they weren't so sure they had done the right thing. Dean was gone, but the disgusting waste was back in the cupboards, on the beds, and mixed in with the food supplies, and they had no clue who the nasty, filth-spreading culprit was. They had no idea either about who spilled milk, broke dishes, moved chairs, knocked over a table, and even splashed water in Mrs. Diggs' face. Not only were the Daggs mystified about what was going on in their house, they were frightened. So when George had to be away from home a few days later, he asked his father to come and stay at the house. That's how John Dagg ended up witnessing some of the spooky incidents in his son's family home. He was there when the windows started breaking. He went outside to try to catch the vandal, but there was no one in sight. To add to their misery, over the next several days, the family had to put out dozens of small fires that broke out spontaneously, and one afternoon an invisible hand hacked off Diana's long braided hair and cut one large chunks of young Johnny's hair. Then, just when the Daggs thought the situation couldn't get any worse, it did. The unseen force that had been tormenting them so terribly started targeting Diana specifically. She began seeing a dark shape in the house when no one else could, and hearing a deep, gravelly voice uttering shockingly crude and vulgar things. She was terrified, and so were the Daggs. Desperate for some peace, they sent Diana to stay with John Dagg for a few days, and the haunting ceased. But as soon as Diana returned, it resumed. By then, the word about what was happening at the Clarendon farm had spread throughout the district, and curious neighbors were showing up, hoping to see for themselves some of the eerie incidents. Desperate for an explanation, the Daggs consulted a fortune teller, brought in clearly men, and agreed to have a man named Percy Woodcock from Brockville, Ontario, spend some time with them investigating their plight. Woodcock was a well-respected Canadian artist who was also very interested in paranormal or supernatural occurrences. Articles about the Clarendon spookiness in local Ottawa Valley newspapers had sparked his desire to learn more about it. He arrived at the Daggs farm on November 16th, and he spent 2 days interviewing all family and anyone else who had direct knowledge of the bizarre goings-ons. He went outside with Diana to a small shed where she had seen the evil spirit that spoke too, and through her there he suffered through a stream of foul language and insults directed at him personally, including threats to break his neck if he didn't leave. More encounters with the snarling invisible speaker continued the next afternoon. When a crowd of neighbors gathered to watch Woodcock challenge the phantom to identify itself in return, it claimed to be both a devil and an angel, leaving observers frightened and confused. After Woodcock left, a minister arrived and the crowd started singing hymns. The ghoulish spirit joined in briefly, laughing at efforts to drive it away. And then it left, threatening to return the next day. Woodcock kept detailed notes of everything that had happened at the Dagg farm in the fall of 1889. He also obtained signed statements from several other witnesses and published his findings in a long report in Brockville newspaper. He made no mention of the torment continuing after November 19th, and there was no known record that it did. Why it ended suddenly after agonizing 2 months, or why it began in the first place, has never been explained. Some locals at the time thought the whole affair was a hoax. But why did the Daggs and Diane try to fool people in such way? Why could they hope to gain other than a lot of negative publicity? Besides, Woodcock made it very clear that he believed the Daggs and Diana were sincere and truthfully, as well as confused and terrified. There were some suggestions that a poltergeist might have been responsible for the bizarre events at Clarendon. A poltergeist is said to be a mysterious, sometimes mean spirit that does things like make strange noises, shake and rattle furniture and windows, snatch and grab small items, and send things flying around a room. It's usually active at night, most often makes its presence known in a household that includes a teenage girl who's under some emotional strain. After a few days or weeks, it seems to stop. What's it doing as suddenly as it started? A poltergeist haunting might very well be explained. What happened to the Daggs and Diana? Maybe Diana deeply missed her home in Scotland, leaving her vulnerable to an encounter with a nasty spirit such as this one. But there's no record of a poltergeist ever speaking through a person the way the Clarendon ghost did, and the identity of the evil presence that possessed Diana and haunted her new home in Canada remains a mystery to this day. So that is it for episode 8 of Lizzoween, the second last episode. I hope you guys enjoyed these ghost stories. Let me know which ghost story was your favorite. Leave all your comments down below. Follow me on all my social medias. You guys know where they're at. Subscribe to be an listener. We would be happy to have you. And always remember to leave a little sparkle wherever you go. And I will speak to you guys in episode 9, the last episode of Lizzoween. Bye, guys!